All right, welcome back to those of you who were here on Monday, and welcome to everyone just joining us today. My name is David Corsar, and I manage career development programs here at the National Wildlife Federation, including this year's EcoCareers Summit, along with support from the youth leadership team and the entire education and engagement department. Again, I would like to thank the students, the faculty, and professionals joining us from high schools, colleges, universities, and organizations across the country, all coming together to learn about rewarding green careers. We had fantastic interaction on Monday, lots of great questions from the audience throughout the day, and we would love to hear you in the individual Zoom sessions as well as in the lobby today. We hope today's sessions will give you a sense of how to convert the knowledge that you gain in classrooms and by working on projects into career skills as you hear from speakers in a range of roles. As you go along, once again, I want to remind you of three things. One is technology. Bear with us during any glitches. If you encounter an issue, please try either refreshing the tab if you're joining via a browser or closing and reopening Zoom if you're joining through the app. Interaction, please take advantage of the chance to interact in the chat and in the Q&A box. The chat box is used to talk to us as well as your fellow participants to add your expertise and ideas to the conversations there. Use the Q&A box to send your questions to our moderators, which will be asked to keynote speakers and panelists at the tail end of their sessions. And finally, NWF support. The National Wildlife Federation is here to support you as you develop your leadership and career skills at each life stage, from pre-K through high school to entering the workforce to further academic goals and beyond. And we hope you will explore and take advantage of those programs. One resource that I'd like to uplift today is our career planning workbook. If you are currently in a planning stage of your career, or if you counsel those who are planning their careers, we hope that this resource may be useful to you all. There's a pinned message in the Zoom events lobby, but I'll go ahead and also drop it in the chat in a moment. Now, to kick things off, I'd like to introduce you to Kristy Drutman, our keynote speaker for today. Kristy, otherwise known as Brown Girl Green, is a speaker, consultant, media producer, and environmental educator passionate about working at the intersections between media, diversity, and environmentalism. As an entrepreneur and climate communications expert, Kristy has educated hundreds of thousands of people across the globe about modern-day environmental issues through speeches and media content, as well as facilitating workshops centered around environmental media and storytelling in cities across the United States. She has been invited to the White House multiple times as an on-ground reporter, was featured in Teen Vogue, New York Times, Refinery 29, among many other publications. She's a Grist 50 Under 50 recipient and a Create and Cultivate Top 100 creator. Kristy is also the co-founder of the Green Jobs Board, a climate tech startup bridging the equity and inclusion gap within the green economy through conversations, resources, and pathways to bring more diverse talent into the environmental field. Kristy, I've been a fan of yours for a while now, and I'm so excited to have you join us today as we kick off day 2 of EcoCareers 2026. I'll go ahead and hand it over to you, and then I will also go ahead and share my screen with your slides.
Yay! I'm so excited to be here with everyone. I'm Kristy Drutman, and I will be delivering a keynote this morning talking all about, what it means to be rooted in community and to grow your green future. It's awesome to hear in the comments that some folks have been following Green Jobs Board and our journey for a while, and I'm so excited to be doing this presentation to dive more into how you can build a meaningful green career and think about how you want to be rooted in purpose as you go through this year's summit. So we will go to the next slide. And I want to do a quick land acknowledgement. I'm currently located on the stolen and unceded lands and waters of the Lenape peoples and tribes, acknowledging that we all live and profit off of stolen Indigenous land. I always find that to be really important for those of us who are working in climate and conservation, that it's really important that we are acknowledging our relationship with Indigenous land stewards and making sure that we are acting in community and partnership with folks who have stewarded these lands and waters for centuries. All right, next slide. So who am I? I'm Kristy Drutman, otherwise known on the internet as Brown Girl Green. I studied environmental planning and city planning and environmental policy at UC Berkeley. And basically, I was so passionate about taking action on climate change and taking care of the planet, but didn't exactly know where I wanted to go or what I wanted to do. I was in many of the folks who are listening in on this position. I was in your seat just a few years ago, finishing college at UC Berkeley, and felt like, I'm so passionate about all these issues, but just don't know the direction I want to take it in. My family is from the Philippines, which is a community that is labeled as one of the most vulnerable countries on the climate risk index in the world. And for me, I felt a deep responsibility and obligation to use my university degree and the access to the privilege and the forums that I had access to build something that I felt could drive impact. And for me, that was through storytelling and building a media career. And we'll go to the next slide. And so that media platform, you guys can check it out. It's on Instagram, TikTok, podcast, videos, blogs, and it's called Brown Girl Green, where I interview environmental leaders and experts who come from diverse backgrounds about climate solutions, about the work that they're doing in the world, and also just making, climate issues and information just more accessible, more entertaining, and more hopeful for, everyday audiences to consume and understand the science, but also to know that there's actions and things that they can do to make a change in their communities. And I'm also the co-founder of Green Jobs Board, which is a climate tech platform that's focused on bridging the gap to bring more folks into climate work, which is very relevant for today's conversation. We host events, we produce content and storytelling, and are now, like I said, building and launching a tech platform where it can be even easier for folks to find and access green careers. And we can go to the next slide. And my work, while it began a lot of it after college digitally and online, telling stories, those stories translated into direct impact with some of the work that I actually got to do in the world. And so on the left, that's a picture with me with former EPA Administrator Michael Regan. I actually was one of 16 members of the US EPA's National Environmental Youth Advisory Council, which, I got nominated and chosen to be a part of. And I was actually, advising on federal policy that and environmental justice policies to impact, young people all across America. And then on the right, that is a project that I did with the Climate Initiative, where I was actually helping build K through 12 climate justice curriculum to help, young folks learn about climate justice and to also take action in their schools and in their neighborhoods. And so for me, while my work started online, I'm actively doing a lot of work off the internet and utilizing my storytelling platform with the ability to now impact policy, education, and all different types of forums that I now get access to be a thought leader and a part of. And we'll go to the next slide. So, everyone deserves access to a clean and healthy environment. It is our human right, but unfortunately, in many places of the world, there's a lot of people who don't have access to this very basic human right. We'll go to the next slide. So I would love in the Zoom chat, if you all are able, I wanted to know how many of you come from a community with clean air, clean water, and access to healthy food. If you guys can drop just a yes or a no, if you come from a community that has access to that, I would love to see your responses if anyone wants to respond. Someone said yes. Someone said no, sadly. Someone said yes and no, because there's also food deserts in their community. We got another yes. And I think it's great that it was pointed out that, like, maybe, yes, you and your own neighborhood directly has access to some of these resources, but maybe in the neighborhood next door to you, there's things like food desert, or where people don't have access to adequate, healthy food or grocery store. And that happens a lot, especially here in the US. We can go to the next slide. And I like to do that exercise because I think when we're thinking about taking care of the planet, we have to talk about inequities and who gets access to those resources and who doesn't. And then we need to trace it back. We need to understand, what are some of the roots in which that led to some of this kind of divide and degradation of nature and our disconnection, and all these things. And a big part of that is this picture here, which is called first contact, which is the idea that, of colonization, where indigenous folks were the stewards of these lands. And, we saw people from the West coming and colonizing America. And basically, this was considered this moment where nature turned from something to not just be like, cohabitating with or stewarding, but something to be controlled, to manage, to be, extracted from, to profit from. And we like to view this as a moment where we started to wonder, like, what is the role of nature and man or humanity? And it started to come head to head. We'll go to the next slide. And we're seeing that this is this climate report called the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is actually one of the international governing bodies that is talking about, law and policy related to climate and climate research. And they identified that, one of the driving factors that's leading to the current crisis around climate change we face today were historical and ongoing patterns of inequities, such as colonialism and governance. And it's showing here that, there is around 3.3 to 3.6 billion people that are highly vulnerable to climate change, and that those folks, are going to have disproportionate exposure to climate impacts due to these historical inequities that have happened, right? And so it's really important that as much as we're talking about the science, around conservation and protecting our local ecosystems, it's also important to understand that there was policy in place, there was governance structures that led to certain communities having access to a clean, healthy environment, and those who don't. And then we'll go to the next slide. So, when it comes to things that I feel are endangering our planet and communities, we're seeing stories like that unlimited growth, consumption, and waste is an inevitable part of maintaining our economy. I hear all the time from people, well, we need to live this lavish lifestyle, or, where our humanity has benefited a lot from resource extraction. And yes, that's true. We can't deny that. A lot of us live a lot of comforts and enjoyment now due to the resource extraction that's happened in the past. But at the same time, we are reaching beyond a tipping point where we can no longer extract, more of those resources without being mindful, without that causing, really deep, devastating ripple impacts to so many communities across the country and the world. The next thing is that we'll be able to easily adapt to climate change, just throwing money at the problem. And sure, we do need that. We need funding, we need solutions funded. And at the same time, we need to still address, the need for diverse decision makers, communities having leadership over what happens to their land and their communities, and all of those things. So, money alone and billionaire philanthropy and all of that is not going to solve this issue on its own, because there's still all these structural inequities that led us into this position in the first place. And the last thing is that economic growth and environmental health are fundamentally at odds. I think there's also this false rhetoric that, like, oh, if you want a clean, healthy environment, then that's going to just be super expensive, going to price people out, and it's not worth pursuing. But we're seeing that that's a lot of short-term thinking, when long-term, when it comes to the health and well-being and economic vitality of a community, it's in the best interest to actually figure out how to invest and grow those opportunities directly in those communities that are being the most impacted. We'll go to the next slide. So, one problem as I see it when it comes to like how people are seeing themselves in this work is that the pace of environmental education is not on par with environmental degradation. I'm going to go to the next slide. We're saying that, mainstream media is still not really demonstrating or talking about climate issues in a meaningful way that's getting more folks involved or getting them to see themselves, in that work or in that image that they have a role to play in it. We'll go to the next slide. And according to Yale climate opinion maps, only 1 in 4 people hear about global warming on the news, and 1 in 2 understand that humans are causing the climate crisis. And so we're seeing this deep disconnect where people, society, modern society, people are saying, oh, well, it's up to the environmentalists. It's up to these other people to kind of deal with the problem. But the fact of the matter is that every single sector across the map is and is going to be impacted by the climate crisis. And so that means we can't just rely on quote unquote climate or environmental people to do this. We need to be totally reshifting the ways in which we're perceiving how our jobs operate, how we operate with our families and our neighborhoods, because inherently, people are not fully grasping that they have a role to play or they have some control over this. It's like going back to the story that's endangering our planet. Some folks think, oh, well, it's inevitable. Climate change is already here and it's happening. There's nothing we can do. But we are showing that in the data and the information, like humans literally are driving the climate crisis. And so that means there's also a huge opportunity for folks to do something about it. But until we actually change those narratives or shift the orientation in which people are relating themselves to this work, it's going to be really difficult to challenge that. And go to the next slide. Oh, yeah. And so this is from the Yale program on climate change communication. And this is just showing that, this is kind of the different types of communities across the US that are kind of approaching the climate conversation. And obviously, there are the disengaged, doubtful, dismissive folks. But I like to look at the left side, that there's even more people that do care, that are cautious, concerned, or alarmed. And that means those are the people most likely to want to do something about climate change. And so for me, I'm like, okay, that gives me hope that there is a more significant percentage of the population that wants to do something about these issues, but just doesn't know the pathways or the opportunities to get there, right? And so that's where I like to place my focus. We'll go to the next slide. And I'm sure for many of you who are attending this summit and other folks, there's a lot of eco anxiety, worries about the planet. I get eco anxiety pretty much every day, where I'm like thinking about the threat of ecosystems collapsing and worried about how people are just talking about like the end of times. And the fact of the matter is like we still have so much in our power and our control to do something about these issues. And they like to say that we are like one of the last generations to really make a pivot and do something really major about this. And so I would say that despite the eco anxiety, there's never been more of an important time than now for you to get involved with this. Next slide. And then, yeah, we do see things like folks taking advantage of these kinds of crises and moments where there's companies who are doing things like greenwashing and kind of like over exaggerating their commitments to sustainability, and people having to kind of challenge that, which can be challenging. We'll go to the next slide. And so, yeah, you can feel this paralysis where you feel this hopelessness, loss of power, and that you need to be an expert to take action. But I'm here to tell you that you don't. We actually need everyone imperfectly in their own capacity and skill sets to be working on this, because it's not going to just be up to like some celebrity environmentalist or some magic silver bullet solution to solve this. We're going to need so many different people with skill sets and talents across the board, working with their communities to make this possible. We'll go to the next slide. And And yeah, and I was going to say that, we also need to address this lack of diverse leadership and voices in the environmental storytelling space and in leadership positions. And we'll go to the next slide. Um, we're seeing that across the globe, there's not great representation of both women and also Black, Indigenous, and people of color in environmental leadership and storytelling. And for me, like that felt like a big issue because when we're thinking again about solutions and how solutions are getting implemented on the ground and what kind of communities are highlighted, we're seeing that of all global philanthropy, only about 2% is focused on climate. And of that 2%, only about 1.3% of it is focused on BIPOC led environmental justice organizations. And so for me, I get concerned about that because I'm like, okay, if we're going to again talk about getting more people involved in climate, but then the communities that are the most impacted aren't actually the ones that are getting supported to like actually be in this work or in the stories that are getting told about solutions, then how can we expect this to penetrate the mainstream media or mainstream workforce to get more people excited about it, right? And that's been deeply on my mind. And we'll go to the next slide. So, part of this conversation is around environmental justice. Environmental justice is the fair treatment, meaningful involvement of all people, race, color, national, with respect to the implement of the next slide. Oh, next slide. Great. And yeah, for those who don't know, the environmental justice movement began in the 90s in the US. This is an activist and advocate across America who's really pushed support, Black and living in their communities. And on the left was, a community sit-in and protest that was blocking the delivery of toxic waste that was going to be in a nearby landfill in North Carolina in the 80s. And I bring this up because, again, when we're talking about the conservation of resources and natural resources, we have to, again, talk about not just about preserving ecosystems and endangered species, but also talking about frontline communities who may or may not have access to a clean and healthy environment. We'll go to the next slide. And yeah, I mean, we're seeing environmental injustice issues happening across the country from, creeks getting, centers that, are causing environmental disasters across the country right now because they're being placed in predominantly, marginalized communities. Again, these are all things that we need to think about as sustainability practitioners and professionals. Next slide. And yeah, these are just more examples of like saying that, when we're talking about green spaces or access to parks or nature or natural spaces, we have to again understand that like some communities who are on the front lines get those spaces taken away from them for development projects. And that really issue again to get to care connection. How can we get them to care if they're getting the very literal nature access they have revoked from them? And next slide. And we're also seeing that, even green solutions that may be marketed as environmentally friendly, again, have intended consequences. We're seeing that there's things like green gentrification happening in South Philadelphia, where there was the establishment of more green spaces, but that actually led to outpricing current community members out of their neighborhoods. So again, it's like, if you're going to be a sustainability practitioner, it's really important that you're really considerate on how all communities impacted by the work that you're doing. On the right, this is an example about a case study in Africa where, conservation efforts are happening in these areas, but there's actually indigenous peoples being pushed out of their land in order for that conservation to happen. Again, if we want for green spaces at the forefront and make sure that the leadership and the work. So, environmentalism needs to be intersectional because it can be the difference between life and death for certain communities, because who controls the controls the we all from the grassroots centering communities, or the implementation of those solutions are going to fail. And lastly, it's always important to remember that communities are the biggest experts of understanding their own needs to solve crises. Next slide. So I always like to ask people, who is your community and how are you staying connected to understand local issues impacting communities and local ecosystems? So I would love in the chat again, community.
Sorry, I think you
If
broke up
anyone
a little
wants to
bit
write that
there,
out in the
Kristy.
comments.
What was the question for the chat again?
Oh, I was asking the question on the slide, who is your community and how do you stay connected to understanding local impact the community that you live within? If folks want to write who their community is in the chat. Great. Well, yeah, we'll have some folks fill that out as I keep going. But David, you can hear me, right? I want to make sure.
Yeah, there's been a few lags and breaks, but we're able to follow you just fine.
Okay. Please let me know if it breaks up again. I
Sure.
definitely want to make sure you hear me.
Will do.
Okay, great. Okay, hopefully you guys have heard everything I've been saying. Let me know if you guys have questions later on. Um, I like this statement. I'm in Houston. I stay connected with community events, local nonprofits, and local leaders and experts I follow. That's great. And someone else said, I make sure to volunteer with local organizations in my community, like the Anacostia Watershed Society here in the DC area. That's awesome. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So, with that being said, that's why I built my platform, Brown Girl Green, because I felt like I was seeing all these issues happening in the world, but felt like there wasn't great coverage of it online, and felt like I wanted to use the internet and social media as a way to bridge gaps and get more people into the room to work on the climate crisis, and to also, take action where need be with their communities. And we'll go to the next slide. And I do that through, Brown Girl Green, which is my media platform. I make videos, I make blogs, I make podcasts. You're able to see here that I do everything from doing like explainer informational videos and interviews to interviewing Indigenous leaders that are working on preserving the Amazon, to even having a climate dating show where I have people kind of interact and build friendships and connections to talk about these issues in a meaningful way. And we'll go to the next slide. And, after building Brown Girl Green for many years and doing that successfully, I was wondering, what else was missing from this conversation? And I realized it was so hard for myself and so many other people to find work in this space. Like, it's so great to take action and volunteer and get active in advocacy, but at the end of the day, people have to pay their bills, figure out how to build professionally. And that's why I decided to build Green Jobs Board. And originally, Green Jobs Board started as a series on my social media that ended up blowing up. And 3 years later, we now have a community of over 200,000 green job seekers across social channels, over 1,000 employers that work with us. And the goal is all to build a very accessible platform and, action center for people to learn exactly what types of career opportunities are out there, how to apply, and telling visually compelling stories around that. We'll go to the next slide. And yeah, part of what we're building with that is a platform that we're calling Pathways, where you'll be able to access opportunities, make an account, and save opportunities, all focused on climate-related careers. And this was basically from a culmination of 10 plus years of working across climate sectors, conservation careers included, with the goal of how can we really find opportunities and pathways to get more people, especially early to mid-career folks, to learn about, like, oh, if you want to build a career in agriculture or conservation, you can click on that and we're going to give you information and job suggestions and mentors you can connect with, because we realized everyone wants to take action on these things, but if you don't give people the proper roadmap or blueprint to do it, it's really difficult to get people to move forward with the next step. And so Green Jobs Board, we like to say, is like a really great first step and opportunity to get more folks into the climate conversation. Next slide, please. And yeah, and like I said, starting with the beginning of what I said in the presentation earlier, like, I don't like to just leave things online. I like to use my internet, digital media perspective to channel into real life action and impact. And Green Jobs Board is doing exactly that. So obviously we exist as an online platform, but the past 3 years we've been hosting our Green Jobs Pavilion events, both in New York City and now in Los Angeles in the Bay Area. And the goal of these events is to really, again, show proof of concept, connect people together, break down barriers through stories and connection and interaction that goes beyond just a job fair. We have thought leadership sessions, career coaches, interactive activities, all focused on helping you figure out how to land a green career and how to really level up and be in the right position to land that opportunity. And these are some pictures from our SF and LA events. We sold out for both and had almost 300 people at each event, which was amazing for a first time thing. And our goal is to hopefully someday have thousands of people coming to this to make it easier for everyone who's interested in building a career to really get trained up and supported to get into this green career space. So yeah, that's basically what Green Jobs Board is building. And we'll go to the next slide. So would love to see on a scale from 1 to 10 now, pivoting more into the career section of my talk, how confident do you feel in bringing climate into your work? So whether that means you already work in climate or you're trying to, let me know 1 to 10. 10 meaning you're like super confident, and 1 meaning you don't know how to get started, but you're interested. Would love to see any numbers on that scale if folks want to put in a number in the chat. All right, we see a 5 or a 6. Anyone else? Okay, we see a 3. Someone said currently in grad school for landscape architecture and they're an 8. That's awesome. Anyone else? All right. Well, we'll go to the next slide. Feel free to keep dropping your responses in the chat. Great. Hopefully this helps you guys hear me even better. But the next slide is just showing that there's all different roles to play within an ecosystem. Out in the natural world, we see people who are in charge of pollination. We see herbivores, we see predators, we see pest control. And just like the natural world, just because some types of roles or companies or organizations may be in the spotlight of what people think is a green career, I like to remind people like, no, there's all different types of roles and industries that make up, protecting the planet. And it's really important to understand where you lie within this ecosystem, because everyone truly does have their own unique role and talents to play in this. Next slide. So why do we need different change makers in different roles? Well, the truth is that building community can be a long, messy, and difficult process, but we now have the tools to bring people together that might never have worked together before. I would say that we need different people because different communities have different needs. It also can place pressure on political and business leaders to step up and not follow the status quo, to see different industries, like even if your company or organization has never had a green role before, building that internally can be even more powerful than you working at an environmental organization. We need all sorts of people who are able to place the pressure and say, no, like this is what early to mid-career professionals and beyond want. This needs to be the default. We need to be building more standards around sustainability and climate in the workplace and show that our generation really cares, and we are going to hold companies, organizations accountable for that is really important. The other thing is that it can build momentum around causes or issues that otherwise are not covered. Again, if you're able to build that role internally, or even if you do apply to work for an organization that is building out some of those programs and initiatives, you're helping build a bigger wave and momentum for issues that otherwise might not have the capacity or the limelight to really have that type of exposure and storytelling. Next slide. And yeah, when we talk about a green job, it lies somewhere between the economic, environmental, and social aspects of a workplace. And then there's subcategories, people who can work in sustainable development, things that are eco-economic, from energy to closed loop or circular economy, or reducing waste, to socio-environmental, where there's people that are thinking about the quality of life and economic indicators, their ecological footprint, environmental law and justice. Again, all of these roles feed into building an ecosystem and an economy that is, benefiting people and the planet. Well, the next slide. And yeah, there's definitely green skills gaps. We're seeing that globally green hiring is outpacing overall hiring in 2023, but we don't necessarily always see enough roles or bridges or the ability for folks to really enter into these careers. Next slide. But when it comes to conservation, we're seeing that US jobs are projected to be green by 2030, around 24 million. We're seeing that the median pay for conservation scientists and foresters is averaging around 68,000, but that number is going up. We're also seeing there being around 3,600 average annual openings projected for the occupation. Of course, that varies depending on your interests. And we're saying that there's pressure points that are driving demand for more conservation careers, from wildfire resilience and fuel reduction to watershed restoration, urban forestry, habitat recovery, and more so. Next slide. And we're saying that opportunity is expanding in conservation to address things like wildland fires, urban forestry, climate resilience, and building community engagement programs. Especially when it comes to climate resilience and natural disasters, we're going to need so many more people that are focused on adaptation and really building the data for protecting biodiversity from being lost, protecting communities to know like what are their like legal and financial protections they may have in mind for their communities. We're going to need things like urban forestry, especially as there is a greater increase in things like urban heat islands and global heating. We're gonna need experts who are understanding how to design and build and research and strategize how to rethink our cities and our spaces across the world. Next slide. So how do you find your role? I want you first to think about evaluating your identity and self-concept. How are you currently defining yourself in the roles you play in your life and others' lives is always a good step to figure out how would you want to help people. like how are people perceiving you as the most helpful? How do you perceive yourself as the most helpful? Is a really good place to start. Then you can think about what are your strengths and skills that you know you're deeply capable of, and what are some that you'd like to work on more of. And feel free to take a screenshot of this. I know that we're coming up on time, so just feel free to take a screenshot and really journal and write about this later on. Next, what do you feel most passionate about? Is that an issue professionally, politically, personally that you care about when it comes to the climate and conservation? Think that over. And where do you see yourself living? Would you want to be local to where you are now? Would you want to do international work in another country or region of the world? That can all help you with maybe the type of research you want to do, the types of careers that are available. It's actually, sometimes people underestimate that, but that's actually a really big deal when it comes to factoring into what kind of career you would want. Next slide. The next thing is, what brings you the most joy in life? When it comes to the types of skills and work that you would do day to day. And also think about what are your non-negotiables for a life well lived. Would you want to be out in the field for 6 to 8 to 10 months, or would you want to work remotely and build your own business? Like, these are all things to really think about when it comes to the type of role that might be a good fit for you. The next thing is, what are existing organizations, projects, or companies that you've learned about that inspire you to take action? So it's really important to look into what are the organizations you really love. Is it NWF? Is it other organizations? Maybe think about it as a starting point on what types of projects they're working on and what kind of things you would get excited to participate in. And then lastly, who are 3 people in your network who could either collaborate with or connect you with to take that next step toward your vision? So I would say pick 3 people that have those different specialties or wisdoms that they could offer you, so that way it can help you think about that type of role you want. So let's say you want to go into, biodiversity protection or research to protect, a local estuary. You can find someone who maybe works on the policy level of that. You can also talk to a conservation scientist. You can talk to a marine scientist. There's all different types of people, but think about who is in that ecosystem that you could contact to understand what kind of research opportunities there are, what types of jobs there are, and really tell them what your vision is of where you want to go next. Next slide. And find community, get involved with a local group on your campus or in your neighborhood. Again, these can be really helpful so you can educate yourself about local issues, get involved, build your leadership. You can also form group chats on Instagram, WhatsApp, Slack, etc., to share opportunities and resources with folks around you. You can also build formal coalitions or partner with existing networks. There's lots of different climate organizations in communities and cities across the US. Figure out how to get involved and learn about where you could volunteer your time to help them out. And then lastly, you can host meetups or community events, bring people towards action, host a book club, really think about, a cleanup in your neighborhood. All of these things can help you build experience in the green space and also get you connected to different networks that you might not have had access to before, which can also help further your career. Next slide. And this is just a funny meme, but this is like a climate summit. What if this is all a big hoax and we create a better world for nothing? What we see on the right, there's lots of great benefits for trying to work in climate and fighting as good as you might, where it's even if the odds feel against all of us to fight for these things, now more than ever, we are seeing the growth in so many different industries, from clean energy to conservation to biodiversity protection to nature-based solutions, that I think now more than ever is the time to get a job in this space. Next slide. So again, I'm not going to go through all of this, but take a screenshot, check it out. But these are some advantageous skills to have to navigate this current green economy, from data analysis to thinking about regulation at a federal or a global level, thinking about how you could design products and materials that can be in connection with nature and focus on nature-based solutions, circular design, thinking about ways you can reduce waste and improve systems and efficiency. All of that is really, really advantageous right now. Next slide. And similarly, screenshot this one. Soft skills to have. If you're a great communicator, if you're a great project manager, I hear from employers all the time that these are the two best things beyond having a passion that are so critical and helpful in building in the green economy. So if you're able to be adaptable to difficult, complicated problem sets, able to research and communicate that research effectively and build systems to help manage those projects, you are golden for so many different organizations and companies and research institutions that are looking for talent like yours. So keep these in mind when you're thinking about how to build in this space. Next slide. So based on all those skills, maybe you have some of those or maybe you don't. Build a skills inventory. What are some of those technical, analytical, or soft skills that you currently have? Where are some of the skills you have that could be transferable to a green industry? And then research existing climate jobs that you find interesting and cross-reference that to that list. What are some of the skill sets that you do have on your list? And what are some that they're listing in the job description that you might not have that maybe you could build through supplemental certifications or volunteering your time or doing an internship? All of these things help you reframe and make sure that you are tailoring, your cover letter, your resume, your interview answers, and et cetera, to supporting that company or organization, what they're looking for. Next slide. And create an action plan. So create that skills inventory. Think about key examples or case studies you have for those skill sets that you have. So again, let's say you only have project management experience, but you've never worked in the green space. Then really lean in. What were those events or those case studies of how you helped an organization out? What are the numbers? What's the data? How are you making that trackable? Again, it's about telling a story that shows the demonstrable impact that you were able to make on an initiative, right? And that doesn't mean you necessarily had to come from the climate space in order to make that possible. And yeah, I would say consider those professional courses or certification programs to fill in the gaps. There's now ones that are not as expensive. And there's ones that you can even get subsidized by your own university or your campus to think about as well. Next one. And think about building a portfolio. So identify what sector issue area you want to develop thought leadership around. Figure out what types of circles you want to be in. Try joining professional groups. Green Jobs Board, we have our own professional group on LinkedIn called Campsite. There's other professional groups where people are constantly posting job opportunities or other connections for you to get involved in. Again, this can give you a better idea of like who's talking in the sector, who's the thought leaders, and how are you fitting into that ecosystem. Next one. And yeah, again, take a screenshot of this, but build a personal statement. Think about how you would want to display yourself on your LinkedIn profile or on your social. So that way people can find you. What are the skill sets that you have? What are you trying to build? Did you speak at a certain event? Did you do a volunteer project? How can I tell something about you within the 1 minute or 2 minutes I have, looking over your portfolio and what you have? I think all of this is really valuable to tell a really clear story about who you are and where you want to go moving forward. Next slide. And lastly, it's so important once you build this all out, your skills inventory, your personal statement, these case studies, find a mentor, find a trusted person. This could be a teacher, an instructor. It could even be a peer or a friend who's at the same level of a career as you, but figure out it's someone who can be a sounding board for your vision. So looking over some of these materials, your skills inventory, the statements you're putting out and getting feedback like, hey, does this reflect what you know about me? Or is there someone who you could introduce me to that maybe works in this industry? And be clear about those objectives. So, ask someone for 15 to 30 minutes to an hour of their time, them ahead of time what they have capacity for, and be really clear on the objective of that call. Maybe the first call is, hey, I just really want to connect and tell you where I want to go. Do you have any ideas of what's, a good next step? The next call could be you're actually coming with clear examples with your resume or your cover letter, asking for support and advice. The next one is, hey, based on everything you know on what I've shown you, are you willing to make an introduction to one or two folks who maybe are on the hiring team of X kind of company or organization? Or are you willing to maybe advocate for me for a grant or a research project? All of that can be really valuable for years to come. And I swear to you, out of all the hacks I'm telling you all, getting a mentor or someone who can advocate for you either internally in an organization or externally will serve you for years to come. Because if you have someone who's willing to go to bat, who has years of industry experience beyond you, then they are literally building a ladder for you that maybe otherwise wouldn't be there and helping you skip some steps. And it's really important that you figure out how to cultivate that intentionally. And if you need more tips on that, make sure to check out our videos on that on the Green Jobs Board YouTube channel, because we do have a whole session on how to find a green mentor. So make sure to check that out. Next slide. And lastly, we need more risk takers, storytellers, and people willing to build a better world. Like I said, I can't be the only one. I'm building a platform to make it easier for every single one of you through these talks, through our events, and through our platform to get into these spaces, because we need you so desperately to change these organizations from the inside out and really drive impact in every community around the world. And last slide. So please stay in touch with me. Check out Brown Girl Green on social media, Green Jobs Board. Follow our newsletter. We post constant opportunities for you guys to get involved. And if you're coming to New York City in September, we would love to see you at the Green Jobs Pavilion to get involved. We will have incredible employers and connectors there that will also help you think through your green career journey. But yeah, so excited to be a part of this EcoCareers Summit. So excited to answer any of your guys' questions, and just so grateful to be invited and to be this year's keynote speaker. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Kristy. That was a masterclass in green jobs, start to finish, and where to go from wherever you're at in the search for and desire to be a part of the clean economy, the green economy. Some of the things that you said that really resonated. One of the things that we say here at the National Wildlife Federation is that every job can and should be a green job. Whether or not you're in the quote unquote green sectors, understanding the way that your work impacts and is impacted by the climate is really important. One question that I have for you, with an entrepreneurial career path that you've followed, how do you manage your work-life balance, and how do you basically stay sane with all that you do on a day-to-day basis?
Great questions. Yeah, I was saying that, as an entrepreneur, I decided to go this route because I felt like I had a vision for something different that I wanted to build that maybe I couldn't necessarily at the stage of the career I was at and still am currently at, could find in another organization. I felt like I wanted to charter my own path. And I think that has worked really well for me because I'm someone who likes to work with lots of different people. And so as an entrepreneur, you constantly have to figure out how to, build a market for what you're doing. And so I would say that it relies on heavy intentional relationship building, making sure that you're really, cultivating those things long term. You can't really, I don't know, get a pass if you're just going to do like one-off things or just, not building those intentional relationships. So I'd say as an entrepreneur, that has allowed me to sustain myself has been taking the time to really build those relationships with clients and organizations I've worked with over several years, which I think has allowed me to like build more of that work-life balance because I'm figuring out, how to scale the value of what I'm doing through every step and journey of what I'm building. With that being said, it's not for everyone. It's definitely a very fast-paced, intense lifestyle. And I would say it would work for someone who maybe has a brain or a mind that works that like is very agile and adaptable and can move really quick on the fly. So it's just like if you want something where like every workday does not look like the next, and you want to work with lots of different people, and you want to figure out how to solve really big problems, I think entrepreneurship is a great pathway for you. And I would say if that's not for you, then I think there is nothing wrong with working for an incredible organization or institution, where you can build that kind of rapport over time for a longer term period. And I think both are just equally as good as each other. I think sometimes entrepreneurship gets glorified as the best thing ever, but I really think it's up to each person. And it really just depends on like the type of lifestyle you want. Like for me, I like the flexibility. I like working remote. I like getting to pick my hours, but some people that might drive them a little cuckoo. So yeah, I would say that's like what I want to say about that. Um, I see someone have an amazing question. Thank you, Persephone. The question is words of confidence or advice for putting oneself out there in networking and connection building. I love this question because I didn't know how to do this. And it was really up to my mentors and older folks that told me how to do that, that really built my confidence. I would say you have to learn that it's going to be awkward at first. It's not going to be perfect to connect with humans that maybe you don't have as deep of a trusted connection with. It will feel awkward. Just accept that it's going to be uncomfortable at first, but that's part of it, right? But be intentional. Do your research. People love people who are earnest and just say, like, hey, I did incredible research on the work that you're doing. X person in X industry. I read your paper. I listened to your talk, whatever. And I want to like have 15, 20, 30 minutes of your time, or I'll buy you a coffee, like whatever. Make it sweeten the deal for them that they can't say no, basically. And when you're in that conversation, be present. Don't be on your phone. Don't interrupt the person. Don't just like focus on what you want to get out of them. Really ask them intentional questions on how you want to connect with them to learn about their journey. And then share your vision. Be vulnerable a little bit. Be like, yeah, like I really admire that because I want to like, I saw someone's in landscape architecture. Like, I want to build, the best permaculture design, in the world. Or, I want to help prevent honeybees from going extinct, whatever that is. Like, tell it this person and just say, I'm trying to like meet people who can maybe show me, like, should I go to grad school? Like, is this career path for me? Like, does this matter? Does that matter? But come prepared with the questions ahead of time. I think that'll help build your confidence. So you're not so scared about asking it on the spot. And then lastly, like, people want to help you. Remember that there's helpers out there. Like, you are not a burden. You deserve your flowers to be in the space. A lot of us have been in that position before. Even for myself, I don't always have the time in the world to talk to job seekers, but like when someone's really intentional and reaches out to me, like I will give them 15, 30 minutes of my time because I know how hard it is to be in that position. And so I would say, don't expect, right away turnaround results. Make it a numbers game. Reach out to a lot of people, but be intentional about it. Do your homework. And ultimately have a good follow-up. After you have the call, make sure you thank the person, have good courtesy and rapport, and update them every 3 to 6 to 8 months about what you're up to, because people want to know. And again, that is what will pay dividends in the future for your career. Do I have time for this last question?
Yeah,
Or
yeah, you can go
okay.
ahead and take this last question.
Okay, last question. I've done a ton of advocacy and activism, but I really hate self promotion. I don't want to come off as braggadocious, which is a hilarious word. Any feedback on self promotion that feels genuine? Think about collaboration. Think about the people that you worked with to make that advocacy or activism possible. I'm always thinking about how can I uplift the voices of the people that work around me. So instead of it being all about you, think about how are you platforming or collaborating with an organization who maybe did that event with you, or who's the university or the organization that you collaborated with, and see, could you do that as a collaboration post? Could you feature an interview or a quote from those people? Find a balance of making it a little bit about you, because it is important to build that thought leadership, but also think about how you're also telling the story of who allowed you to be in that position in the first place too, because it's really important that people know that it's not just a solo dolo act, that it requires a village, because it really does, and to really emphasize that in how you're talking about the work you do.
That's a fantastic response and a great way to end this session. Kristy, again, I want to thank you for participating in this year's EcoCareers Summit. We will be staying in touch and of course, following along with with all of the work that you do. For everyone in the session, we have a 15-minute break, and you can rejoin the next session via the Zoom lobby, clicking join on the next session when it starts.
Yay, thank you guys. Bye.
Thank you so much.